these truths to be self-evident.
That all men are created equal.
As a member of Congress, I get to have a lot of really interesting people in the office. Experts on what they're talking about.
This is the podcast
for insights into the issues.
China, bioterrorism, Medicare for all. In-depth discussions.
Breaking it down into simple terms. We hold
these truths.
With Dan Crenshaw.
The Eagle has landed.
Hey guys, welcome to the Lila Rose Show. As you can see, this is not my office. It's pretty cool though. This is Congressman Dan Crenshaw's office. We're going to be talking with him about the next 100 days of the Trump presidency, his amazing work, the fight for life, and so much more. We're also going to have a special guest that you'll meet in a moment. Congressman Dan Crenshaw, thank you for making time for this.
Thank you. Thanks
you
for having me.
You are world's best dad and congressman right here.
I know. This is something. Don't touch the microphone.
Suzy, thank you for joining. I really appreciate it.
Mommy had the flu real bad today. I was like, all right, we can. I think we can take her in today. It's not too bad of a day. But this is nap time. I was really counting on her sleeping in that dark closet over there around this time. And I've been trying for the last 45 minutes, and she just. No.
She wanted to be a part of the interview, Dan.
It'll make it better. It'll make it better.
It already is.
I think it'll deteriorate at some point.
No.
But I think we got it for now.
Suzy, I really appreciate you joining, Suzy. Thank you for skipping
welcome.
Nap time for this. I really appreciate it.
We're starting on words. We're not so good at operating YouTube, but we're good at words.
Well, I got to say first, thank you for your service.
Thanks, Lila. Yeah, thank you for
I don't
yours.
think we thank you enough, and you're not only an incredible congressman and fighter for life and for family and both how you live and what you do in office, but also just your service to this country long before that. So thank you.
Appreciate it.
It's a gift.
Oh, thank you.
And I also want to thank you for being a man who's both a realist, but you have a vision for what we need to fight for. So I'm excited for this conversation and for whatever Suzy chooses to contribute, because the next 100 days of this Trump new presidency are crucial, and I know you have a lot of thoughts about it.
Yeah.
And I really value you making the time to share. Yeah, it's going to be busy.
It's going to be busy. Yeah. So where do you want to begin? And thank you for all you do. I think putting the proper light and face on the pro-life movement. I think we've made a lot of progress, obviously, in the last 5 to 10 years. And I think it's because we've changed the way we present the issue and talk about it, and it's about love as opposed to hatred of the other, and I think that's the right message.
Awesome. All right, let's start with top of the mind, most important, life, protecting babies.
For Trump in the next 100 days.
Yes.
A little bit hard for me to speak for him. I can only imagine, and I don't have all his a long list of executive orders memorized, but you're looking at a Trump team that's obviously much more organized and much more experienced than the last time when they probably didn't even expect to win. So you're already seeing some of those policies come back into place. There's a long list, and I'd have to literally read from them, and it's a little bit difficult to manage that right now. But you'll see the obvious protections like the Hyde Amendment. You'll see the Mexico City policy.
So your think it's been, what is it? We're filming Thursday after inauguration. Mm-hmm. There have been, I think, 200 executive orders.
Yeah. A
bunch of good ones, by the way. There's like some really awesome stuff happening. Yeah. There hasn't been anything on life yet. So I know a lot of us are saying, when's that coming? So you feel confident though it's coming?
I think so, and I think it's going to look a lot like the last administration. Again, I've got some prep here with some lists. It's just a little hard for me to read now. Yeah. I think we can get to that. She's going to lose her mind here in a minute.
That's okay.
And when that happens, my hands will be free. But
there's the Mexico City policy.
There's the Mexico City policy. There was so many.
There's abortion on military bases, which I know you're passionate about getting that off of our military bases.
Well, it just obviously you agree. It shouldn't. I think it would violate the Hyde Amendment, right?
Yes.
Any federal payment for any kind of abortion at all. Some of the things that they did do in the past, here we have it. It's CMS approved a Section 1115 waiver for Texas, for instance, that excluded clinics that offer both family planning and abortion services from participating in the state's family planning program.
Yep.
So then you can expect things like that to come back. Biden administration issued guidance enforcing what's called the Emergency Medical Treatment and Labor Act, which requires hospitals to provide stabilizing treatment to patients. That guidance clarifies that hospitals and physicians have obligations to provide stabilizing care. A Trump admin might revise this. We would hope, and we could ask them. Okay. I think a Trump admin could revise this and say that hospitals must also provide treatment
a new video
to both mothers and unborn children. So it's not like the Biden administration was saying no, but you could revise that, make it more clear.
Yeah.
And as we've seen many times, when we vote on the Born Alive Act, it's Democrats for some reason just
it's crazy. That happened yesterday.
They can't even vote for that.
Yes.
So that's a little bit ridiculous. I think let's see. Yeah, we've talked about Mexico City policy. This is stuff that they did before, and you can expect again. Rule preventing Title X taxpayer funding from subsidizing abortion. They support the Born Alive legislation, cut all funding to the United Nations Populations Fund due to the fund's support for coercive abortion and forced sterilization. There's a long list here. I don't know if I want to read it all here. Stop federal funding of fetal tissue research. There's a number of things, and of course, created a Supreme Court that overturned Roe v. Wade. Now we can't do that again, but now it's a lot of this fight is up to the states. He's been pretty clear he doesn't want a national abortion law, and there's an open debate as to whether that's a good idea. I tend to think it's probably a good idea, both just politically and morally, because Lindsey Graham's argument was obviously he's the one who proposed the 15-week ban, and that was a little controversial. And
I feel like that something like that should not be controversial, but I understand that we are in a moment that it is.
Yeah.
But
everybody's on the same team and wants the
Yeah.
same thing. It was just a matter of why put this front and center? But one of the benefits politically, and I think Lindsey Graham's argument would be, and I tend to agree with this argument, is that at least it draws a line in the sand and shows where we're at, as opposed to letting Democrats claim someplace we're at.
Yeah.
And there's some political benefit in that.
Yeah.
Want to just run around with it, see what happens?
And just as a fun water bottle.
Yeah. Well, she can open those and pour them down.
I have a 9-month-old, and she's obsessed with.
She likes water bottles, but she can open them and drink out of them.
She
likes to drink out of them.
Even if it's been fully closed?
Yep. Well, she might. If it's really tight, she might not be able to, but we can always test the theory.
High skills down here.
She's very strong.
You're high skills.
Yeah.
Very strong like her dad.
She's 15 months. She's getting
Maybe
up
I
there.
shouldn't give her that.
Yeah.
No,
I give her if what it's like down here, because she'll drink it and actually not spill it.
That's an impressive skill, Congressman.
It's somewhere around here. So I don't know. It's been chaos today.
You're crushing it.
But I think obviously he's making his first 100 days. He's making good on the big promises, the border issues. We've got a budget to pass. It's March 14th. That ends. We got a debt ceiling to deal with. I think our suggestion and what I think we'll end up doing is focus on the appropriations with California wildfires. And so I think you get a more conservative appropriations bill done, because Democrats, at least from California, have to vote for it if it has wildfire support in it. You can raise the debt ceiling in that same bill, and it kind of creates a bit of a smoother glide path for a good reconciliation bill, which is what the conference has been working on every day. Just figuring out, okay, where are you going to get your savings from? That's the big question. You can't just do what Democrats do, because Democrats just helicopter money everywhere when they do a reconciliation bill. They have a very easy time doing it. We have to also sell to our voters that we're not drastically raising the debt. Now, it's a little, the counter argument, you could also argue, look, all we're actually doing is letting you keep your tax rate as is. And unfortunately, the way that's scored is a cost. But now, philosophically, you could argue it is not a cost to let you keep your tax rate where it is. Because, okay, just for everybody listening, the Trump tax cuts expire this year. So your tax rates automatically go up by a decent amount. And so for us to keep them where they're at, CBO scores that as a cost. And so you have to look at other places to get savings. And that's the big conversation right now. Every committee is going to be in charge of finding those savings. I'm on Energy and Commerce. That's a really big one, because you're talking about potential Medicaid, a lot of Medicaid changes there that I think are much needed. That would, that can go into the hundreds of billions of dollars over 10 years. So every committee will be doing that, and that's what everybody's focused on for the next few months, because we want to get that done right out the gate.
And the end result of that would be what for the American family?
Well, you get to keep your low taxes. They don't automatically go up. That's a big one.
And
that's the goal.
That's billions in savings for American families, right?
Right,
it's
right.
Huge.
So it's the way it's legislated up here is it's counted as a cost to the federal government. So we do have to find cost savings elsewhere, which is what we should be doing anyway. It's almost like this is a good excuse to do it.
Right.
So. Yeah, it's again, Republicans aren't in the business of like giving you things, but we are giving you more of your money back.
Yes.
It's not going to feel like it because it's going to feel like you have the same tax rate. But people have to know is those tax rates are the ones we gave you back in 2017, and they're set to expire. And we don't want that to happen. We want to keep them in place. There might be some other benefits too. I think there's, we're talking about children and pro-life issues, perhaps increasing the child tax credit, things like that. But for the most part, we're just trying to keep the tax code in place, and that's going to require cuts elsewhere. Not cuts that I think the American people will be hurt by, But I think cutting a lot of wasteful spending that should be cut, and we don't want to talk in too much detail about that because it just hasn't been decided. That's what a lot of these conferences we're having are about. We're having a lot of meetings about
That's an expensive bouncy ball.
Yeah. iPads are resilient. It's going to be fun.
Got a Navy SEAL in training over here.
Yeah. She just found a video of herself playing soccer.
That is hilarious.
It's amazing what she's able to do.
Well, I think the whole make this country healthier for families economically is a huge reason Donald Trump won re-election. It's one of the reasons people love you. It's obviously we have to fight to protect life in the womb. We have to fight this, to stop this gender transitioning of children, all of these things. Yeah. But a big part of all of this fight too is having a healthier economy. Oh, Bubby. She is tough.
She's a tough cookie.
She's a tough girl.
She's a Navy SEAL daughter.
Wow.
Yeah, she's like, boom.
See, I have a 9-month-old. If that had happened, we would be losing it. So, on the transition thing. So that's one thing I think we can get reconciliation. We came up with a creative way to do that. But keep in mind, for people understanding reconciliation, you can't put policy in reconciliation. This is the budget reconciliation process.
Budget reconciliation means it has to be budgetary in nature. So you can't really put any policy in place. We say we're going to fix the border and reconciliation. I want to manage everyone's expectations. It has to be budgetary in nature, which means we can spend money on a wall. We can spend money on, and the administration says they're going to need about 80 to 90 billion. So that's a spending. So we got to find where we're cutting to get that money.
I have a question about that. So there's this whole DOGE department, and you and I were discussing this earlier. And people were super pumped about, if you have Elon Musk behind it, it sounds so exciting. And exciting. The idea of just getting rid of all of this bureaucracy and waste. And of course, we were very pumped to see them mention Planned Parenthood, the biggest abortion chain, are getting $700 million a year. Is that going to play a role in the budget reconciliation process? Are we going to see significant cuts to all the bloat in the federal government, including the abortion industry bloat, or what are you seeing?
Well, you got to look at places where you're going to get hundreds of billions of dollars, not a few million here and there, because it just won't have an effect. You should. We do that every time through appropriations, but in the end, you still need consensus. So the answer is yes, but we're really looking at big ticket items. So.
$700 million is something, though, right?
No, it's practically
it's something
nothing.
To the baby. There's something to the babies that they're murdering. I think
that's true. That's true. But
yeah.
we already attack that issue constantly. Again, it's.
But I guess I'm asking, do you think Planned Parenthood's going to make it? Funding for them will make it in the budget. Or are we going to cut that?
Well, first we have to explain to people how funding even gets to Planned Parenthood. It's not like there's a line item for Planned Parenthood. That's never how it's been. Planned Parenthood, does services, and then they charge Medicaid for them, and they claim those services are not abortion. They're other kinds of care. Of course, our investigations show that the vast majority of their care is indeed abortions. And so that's the conflict. That's how they supposedly get money from the government. And, this goes into the child transition stuff too, the gender transition stuff, where we've seen evidence in Texas, for instance, where it became illegal, and doctors will code they'll enter a code for like endocrine therapy, and not calling it gender transition, and it's scamming Medicaid. So yeah, you need oversight over it to really get to the bottom of it, but it's already illegal, and people need to understand that it's already illegal for Medicaid dollars to go to any kind of abortion for Planned Parenthood, and there's no Planned Parenthood line item. The difficulty is that money fungible, and that's not as easy to figure out as people think, and especially not in reconciliation, where you can't do serious policy changes. But we have come up with a creative way, at least on the gender transition issue, which would change like the Social Security Act. And because what we're really trying to do is defund children's hospitals that are doing gender transitions. I've had a bill that does that. It made it out of committee. We never voted on it. And so it's something I've been pressuring the speaker to do, but a better path will be through reconciliation. And again, just to explain to people why reconciliation matters is because you only need 51 votes in the Senate. That's why. Everything else, you need 60 votes. That's why all this stuff is tough.
And how many we have, right? Just for folks listening, I know we have a lot of politicos who listen.
We have 54. Am I right about that?
We're short several votes in the Senate to get meaningful, big, beefy
definitely
stuff
don't have
through.
60.
Yeah.
And we have like one to two, depending on what month you're talking about, because of people going to the administration, people retiring, a bunch of reasons. Maybe at most we might have a 3 to 4 seat majority in the House, and obviously it's like wrangling cats here. So, getting anything meaningful done is tough, and getting together and getting reconciliation done right is going to be important. But the president's priorities are energy, keeping his tax cuts in place, and border, and then it's up to the committees to kind of find that money. And we've had presentation after presentation of like where we actually find some savings. Coming from Energy and Commerce, we have our conversations. The president doesn't, you don't want to touch Medicare because it freaks out all seniors. So you've got to look at streamlining Medicaid and making that a better system. And there's a whole bunch of complicated ways to talk about that, about options that exist out there. Mostly to do with what the federal share is for each state, and it gets kind of boring and wonky, but it's meaningful. I mean, a lot of states rely on this money, and they've gotten addicted to it, and this is kind of a constant problem in all federal programs, really. So it'll be interesting to see where reconciliation ends up.
What's the timeline on that? The budget reconciliation process?
Everybody says they want to get it done by April. It's a little bit of an arbitrary timeline, but there's an urgency to it. While we feel we have a mandate to do it, and so that's why we're basically in session constantly up until then. But keep in mind, you also got to do the debt ceiling, the appropriations bills as well. So all that happens within that time frame. Are you getting tired?
We have a 9-month-old, and literally the other day, she would not go down. So we just let her literally just crawl around and play around and do her kind of crazy antics until she just sat down. Just was like, she had to put herself to sleep on the kitchen floor mat, basically. Yeah. But then like put her in the crib, and it ended up working out. But sometimes it just works that way.
It might happen right now. like she's just on the floor.
So it sounds like you're very realistic, but you're hopeful that we can get a boatload done in the next few months.
Yeah.
If
everybody sticks together, this is a common problem that has been for the last 2 years. Has been terrible because there's been an incentive structure for a lot of our right wing to just muck things up, really for no reason, because frankly a lot of the activists like it and they'll donate money to it. Why? I don't know. I think it's silly.
Donate money to chaos.
Donate money to chaos, like as if it's a good thing.
Like endless dissent.
And just contrarianism for the sake of contrarianism. But now you have Trump in place who kind of grabs people by the scruff of the neck and says no. He says you finally have a coach, and that's a good thing because it's more unifying. He's a different person, I think, than he has been before. I think he's very much into reconciliation of. I mean that in the more human sense this time, not the budgetary sense of just look, past is past. Like we got to work together. and get some wins, because I tell voters all the time, I'm like, well, I like this person on what they did. And I'm like, well, what did they do? Did they win anything for you? Or are they just fighting for your attention? Because they're like, well, they fight. Yeah, they fight for your dollars and for your attention. They're not fighting for your policy wins. They don't care about your policy wins. They're not even they don't even try to get on the committees that would do your policy
Are you
wins.
talking about people in Congress?
Oh, yeah.
Who are not team players?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we don't know who they are. But I think you're going to see a change.
And by team players, I mean they are just going to be...
Just always know. Just always
nothing's
know.
Good
Nothing's
enough
ever.
Ever.
It's pure, yeah.
Because I'm sitting here partly as an activist, so that resonates with me in terms of we got to have meaningful pro-life wins. Mm-hmm. But you're saying it's not even about meaningful wins with this group of folks.
A lot of times, yeah, it's just contrarianism for it's never good enough. You can always find something in a bill. She did it. She got it. Yeah, this is gonna get.
I'm extremely impressed by your daughter. She just opened a water bottle, guys, by herself. It was tightly screwed. Here's a question for you, Congressman. What can the pro-life community do and the conservative movement who are pro-family to best encourage, call to action Congress and the president right now to have those meaningful wins? And we understand, there's a lot of, priorities that are competing, but it's, this is our family, these are our children, this is the future. So what would your advice be?
I mean, I still think you gotta continue winning the culture war. We shouldn't spike a football after Roe v. Wade. That was a legal battle we won. That didn't change the culture war. If anything, it aggravated the left to fight harder. And we saw a lot of losses in a lot of states where we were surprised we saw losses in. You know them better than I do, but like Ohio, for instance. Missouri, I think.
We had a horrible loss in Missouri.
Yeah, she's upset about it. She's so upset about it. She's now spilled water all over my desk.
I'm curious your take on the antinatalism response in public policy.
The anti-what?
Antinatalism response in public policy, like helping the American family. You mentioned child tax credits. Would love to hear anything more on that front that you want to share. It's being worked on in Congress right now.
Ann Wagner does a lot on this, but I mean, trying to figure out family, how do you support a family that just had a child? A child tax credit's one way, but that comes at the end of the year. I think I signed onto a bill. So I like this idea of being able to borrow from your own Social Security years down the road. That makes a lot of sense. It doesn't change the long-term trajectory of our Social Security problem. You basically retire a year later or something, which is probably something we're gonna have to deal with at our age anyway if we ever want to fix that program. So there's I think with some common sense ways to do it. I think looking at ways. It's not my committee, so we don't deal with it exactly. This is more Ed and Workforce Committee. But I told you I was like, shit. Shouldn't have showed her this thing opened. But
those look too big to swallow.
But looking at, and I don't think we have legislation worked up right now. But ways to encourage employers, especially for low income workers, encourage them to be able to offer. Paid family leave that isn't some big giant federal program the way Democrats want to do, and it would just be impossible to work. I mean, it would just turn into this huge system that we, again, just can't afford unless everybody wants really high taxes.
So when you think about America in 5 years or 10 years, what do you think we can achieve? Politically, yeah. I know culturally, obviously, we're fighting, but when you're an elected member of the most powerful Congress in the world, body in the world, next to the executive branch of the judiciary, our American U.S. Congress. You'll probably be a senator one day. I don't know if you're planning on anything else or have your own election.
It's not really the step up people think it is.
Okay.
I mean, it's not like you get paid more. Your schedule's the same.
I'm just saying, I think you've got a long path in front of you of public service after what you've been doing already. What do you think America looks like in 5 to 10 years? What should we be aiming at politically?
For
the family. I mean, your daughter, she's one. She'll be 5, she'll be 10.
I mean, look, I think there's already a huge backlash culturally and now legally and politically against anything DEI, woke related. It hit a climax and it's really on a downturn. I think that's great. I think for the simple reason that people realize that the best way to not discriminate against race and gender is just to not discriminate against race and gender. I'm quoting I stole
Brilliant.
that. Yeah. I did steal that from Senator Kennedy, who said it on an interview a couple days ago. But it's but we've been saying that for years, and we've been winning the arguments. And on the pro-life side, again, it's still a culture war. And we've got to win it at the state levels. And while I may agree, I'll vote for a bill. It's 15 weeks. You want me to vote for 0 weeks? Yeah, I'll vote for it. But I'm in an easy position. I'm from Texas, deep red. That's an easy vote for me. Don't think that's going to happen in the Congress. And I think that's where Trump's coming from when he says he's not going to propose it. Where he's coming from is this understanding that there's a political position and there's a moral position, and sometimes they can coincide if you come from the right, if you're representing the right district. Sometimes they can't, and then sometimes you got to think strategically, wherein you spike the football too hard, then there's a backlash, and again, there's some examples where we've seen that backlash where Democrats have been smart and they've put kind of these sneaky abortion laws on the ballot that I don't think people are perfectly educated on, and codified a very late abortion in some of these red states. So there's obviously some more education that we have to do. This is an issue that gets young people out. Young people don't come out for fixing Social Security. I don't know why. They should. You talk about issues that matter and are going to crush your economy in 50 years or maybe less. Crush your retirement. Maybe you should probably come out and vote for Republicans on that, because we actually want to fix it. Democrats just want to tax you more so that they can transfer those taxes directly to your grandparents. But young people come out for this kind of thing.
It is the babies.
Yeah, but it's
everything.
It's slowly changing. I think we're educating more and more young people on what it is to be pro-life and why it's important. But the reality is we still have some work to do.
Yes. I think the work that we have to do, obviously, like you said, I totally agree. It's a good point. It's education. There's the backlash from the left, and they had so much money to pour into their propaganda campaign. So that's work. I know Live Action's focused on that. A lot of people are realizing how important that is, doubling down on that. Politically, I'm excited because the more we can, move the Overton window of possibility, where people were like, it was impossible, with Roe v. Wade, it's impossible to pass pro-life laws because of Roe v. Wade, people would say, right? And I think now it's possible, and it's going to take courageous voices. I mean, you are a courageous voice. I know you said, I'm a red state. It's not as hard to be courageous in Texas because they're all, courageous in Texas. But to still say, listen, of course the federal government does have a role long-term in protecting life. I mean, it's our Constitution that everyone here is supposed to uphold and legislate for.
Yeah.
So it's an all-in strategy. I think everybody has a role to play. And then 10 years from now, what does the future look like? Your daughter will be 10. My daughter will be 10. I've got a 9-month-old. When they're teenagers, what is America going to look like? I mean, that's what the whole project is about.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, it's making the argument, and it's easy to debate them on it, because, you debate anybody on a pro-life, whether if they're pro-choice and you want to have that conversation. Notice they always bypass the debate. They always talk past you. They always immediately go to the exceptions, and to the hard stuff. I'm like, I'm always like, just to be clear, if you're just bypassing the whole conversation about abortion and going straight to the conversation about the exceptions, which are more, I get those are more difficult. So then, do we agree that there should be 0 weeks for abortions of convenience? Do we agree on that? Because if you want to talk exceptions, then we must agree that there should be 0 abortions of convenience. And they're like, well, I didn't say that. Well, but you kind of did. I mean, you're accepting that, and it's about accepting the humanity of it too. And I think we've tailored our arguments over time in a much better way. Where I just tell people all the time, I'm like, you call it a baby when you want it. You don't call it you don't call it a zygote or some clump of cells. When you want the baby, you say my baby. So just from it's not religion. That's not my religion talking. That's just a human talking. It's not about science or anything. It's just you feel it as a human being, and you really can't counter that. And I think we continue that. We win the culture war on this, and we convince more people. It's I think I do like heartbeat bills as a good place to start for some states, because again, it always depends on the politics of the state. And Florida was courageous in getting theirs done, and because it's easy to explain. If it has a heartbeat, it's a human. How do you say it's not? And it's so some of that. You hate to admit it, but sometimes politics does have to play a role here, and politics meaning our ability to actually persuade people.
Yeah, we did some polling in Florida, and when we described in the poll what the abortion procedure was, even for like before the heartbeat, like the chemical abortion pill, this starves a developing, human to death via cutting off its nutrients. Majority of Floridians in a blue state were like, yeah, let's ban that. Whatever that is, let's ban it. But when you look at, polling where they said, oh, should abortion be restricted in the first trimester? People are going to say, oh, no. But if they know what that abortion is, what it entails, it flips the poll, which is crazy to me. And it just shows that education is so crucial because people just don't know what they don't know.
Yeah, and that's another issue I think we could fix. Speaking of Mifepristone, I always get this name wrong, but
Mifepristone.
Mifepristone. Yeah. This is a battle we've fought against the Biden administration because they essentially lifted the FDA is essentially just made it too easy to get out, and I think not following the science. I mean, this is a drug that has potentially terrible side effects. It's potentially dangerous. Now, I'd love to just outlaw it, but again, we don't have the votes for it. But we will be pressuring this new FDA administrator to at least put those old parameters back in place. Off the top of my head, I don't remember what they were, but basically, at least it forces a physician to be. You can't just send it to somebody at their house and have them take it. Okay, so there has to be some parameters in place for safety reasons, which of course, does it restrict the use of it? Yeah, it is. Yes, don't get me wrong. Like I want that, and I admitted I remember talking about this at a hearing. I'm like, yeah, don't get me wrong. I think any pill that just kills a baby is bad. Don't get me wrong.
Sounds reasonable.
If you're accusing me of restricting it, yes, you are correct. I am trying to restrict it, but also. What I'm saying makes sense. If it's gonna be legal, and I don't have a choice about that, then at least our administrative state, which is the FDA in this case, should use science to properly administer it and put those guardrails around it, which they lifted, and it's inexplicable why.
So overall, would you say your feeling about this second administration in the next 4 years? Despite a lot of the challenges, both from the opposition, on the pro-life side, there have been concerns like when are we going to see these pro-life actions? But you're saying, big picture, you think we're in a good spot. We're going to see some big wins, pro-life and beyond.
I hope so. Again, I can't speak for what the Trump administration is going to do on the executive order side. I just don't know, and I don't want to guess. Again, I kind of listed a few things they did last time. It seems likely that those happen again. I do think a lot of our fights have to be at the state level. We are not going to get the votes for some of the bigger wins here. This is a decades-long fight. It really is. It's a decades-long education. You've got to change the minds of entire generations. So I don't want to give false hope. I can only tell you what my position is in the end. It's too hard to predict what this Congress is going to do, and especially with the slim majorities that we have. These things are very difficult. I can speak more for unification on things like again, defunding and preventing. Gender transition care for minors. I mean, that's a battle I've been fighting for a while now, and I feel somewhat confident I can get that into reconciliation. Not only that, because it's a cost saver as well, just a couple billion, actually. A couple billion if we stop hospitals from funding hospitals that are killing, that are mutilating babies, children. The way we constructed that, I think there was actually a cost. The CBO rated that as a cost saver, so it's not much, but have they looked at the disbar? If we disbar hospitals or clinics that do abortions from Medicaid, has that been looked at? Debar, excuse me, is the correct terminology, right? Is it debar? Medicaid funds? Again, it's a coding issue. So, that's why the Planned Parenthood thing is difficult because they're coding Medicaid, they're charging Medicaid, they're going to be reimbursed by Medicaid under a certain code. And that code is not abortion. That's already, meaning these hospitals are directly coding for gender mutilation. So that's part of our oversight job on energy and commerce is looking at that. And that's because that's been brought to us by some whistleblowers.
So you can cut the Medicaid codes of hospitals for the procedures in hospitals that are transitioning little kids.
Well, in theory, it would be what they're doing is illegal, and this would be a court issue, not a Congress issue. Because if you're intentionally, that's fraud. I mean, that's Medicaid fraud. If you're doing a gender transition, but you're labeling it endocrine therapy, and so that's an oversight issue for us, and that's something we're also looking into as well. On how to deal with that. Again, it's helpful to have a Trump administration in place where we have a more friendly CMS, a leader of CMS who's actually going to look into this.
You're very realistic about all of this. How do you see your leadership over the next decade?
My goal for a long time is I can only focus on so many things, right? So I've been focused on the gender transition issues for minors. Like that has to stop. That's a 90% issue. It should be the easiest thing in the world to vote on.
Especially if we're paying directly for it and taxpayers are directly funding it. It's insane.
Yeah, I mean it's pretty gross. But it should just be illegal. Period. It's illegal. And the Labour Party, far left party in the UK, won recently overwhelmingly. One of the first things they did was ban this practice because all the science is out at this point. It turns out it's bad for kids. Yeah, I would imagine. So we've won that argument. I think we'll win that legally. We're just kind of looking for the right legislative vehicle to get it done. But I think that does happen. Parents have been lied to by these crazy doctors over and over again. There's some really horrific stories out there. So just realistically, that's something I think we can actually win.
It's a key win.
Yeah, it really is. Obviously, my other big focus is just totally unrelated to cartels, and well, I guess it's not totally unrelated. I mean, cartels, what do? They traffic children. They'll do sorts of terrible, horrible, heinous things. We're at war with them, whether we want to admit it or not. And Trump administration recently labeled them as a terrorist organization. That's fine. It's a good message to send, but there's a lot more that has to happen to actually make good on that promise that we want to take them out. And
what do you want to see happen with the cartels?
Oh God, how long do you have? I mean,
long as you have, long as the boss has. Actually,
I mean, I lead the cartel task force.
You lead the cartels task force here on the Hill.
And a task force just means a group of members that focus on a particular problem. We had no funding, we had no staff. I'm trying to turn it into a select committee because this is one of Donald Trump's big priorities, is taking on the cartels. But we have a number of pieces of legislation that would target the cartels, from easy stuff like just increasing a fine here for mislabeling a air cargo manifest with chemical precursors from China. $5,000 fine right now, make it $5 million or whatever. Some easy ones like that. Some more money for assets in Mexico that the Mexicans will let us use. And then there's much bigger issues we have to tackle on the financing. Like what kind of resources do we need at Treasury to get them to do more on sanctioning businesses that are associated with cartels? We've already had some big wins in legislation. So and one of them was, people might be surprised that we couldn't actually use our FISA authorization, which is basically it's basically the way we wiretap foreign entities. But those foreign entities are very specific. They have to be terrorists, they have to be foreign intelligence, or they have to be, has to do with weapons of mass destruction. You're allowed to use FISA for that. It's a controversial program, I think, because people are deeply misinformed about it. We could get into that at another time. But we added a fourth category, which was anyone involved in the trafficking of synthetic opioids. So that now includes, because it blows people's minds, but we weren't actually allowed to spy on the cartels before, if you could imagine that. We weren't allowed to spy on them. We weren't allowed to spy on the Chinese precursor companies making this stuff and sending it to them, and also doing the whole money laundering scheme with them. So now we've fixed that problem.
And they're often human traffickers too, right?
All sorts.
It's all of it.
We could get into a long conversation on how all of this happens and actually why it's a difficult problem set. And most people are just not educated on this. Everybody thinks they are. We'll just kill them. We'll just get them. Oh, if we label them terrorists, then we could just kill them. I'm like, no, it doesn't work that way at all. It's a good message. I like that Trump is taking it seriously. And we do need to kill them. But the biggest thing we need is a Mexican security cooperation agreement. We need a plan Mexico the way we have a plan Colombia. We've been dealing with Colombians for 30 plus years. We've had special forces in and out of Colombia all the time, and the Mexicans have always told us no. But
why is that?
Because they're still upset about 1848. Honestly,
wow,
it really is that.
I guess the Gulf of America is not going to help.
It's not going to help. It's a sovereignty issue for them. It's a pride issue. It's long been, and I grew up in Latin America, grew up in Colombia, so this even surprised me the more I looked into it. And so there's some delicate diplomacy that needs to happen. It's a carrot and stick approach that has to happen to get them to do that. You got a new administration in Mexico that I think is more friendly to this idea. But you got to work with them. And unless we choose to do unilateral ops, and then what the heck does that look like? You're dealing with an insurgency in Mexico. It's not like there's like camps that are obviously full of cartels and you can just bomb them. It doesn't work that way. They're very much integrated into the society, and you need a counterinsurgency campaign alongside the Mexican government to actually deal with it. So there's a lot to talk about there. A lot of it's executive branch, but a lot of it's Congress has to fund it. We have to authorize it. We've done all this research for the last year, and there's one of the reasons I say we need a select committee, and this is just getting into kind of civics nerd stuff, but let's say we've got 10 different pieces of legislation. They cut across like 9 different committees of jurisdiction. So I'm never going to get anything done that way, and especially without staff, because we've got ideas, but they need to be fleshed out. Doing proper legislation takes some time. You got to have some lawyers involved. You got to have the experts at the administration involved. Make sure the lawmaking you're doing is the correct lawmaking. That takes a lot of time and staff work. I guess to try and answer your question more simply, can you just stop Medicaid payments from going to Planned Parenthood at all? In theory, yes, you could pass a law to do that. Can you do it through reconciliation? I don't think so. I think that would be ruled out of order because it's a policy change. It might be straight up unconstitutional to begin with.
I think there's a way to. I think what they've done in past years is there's a way to not say Planned Parenthood in the lawmaking and the reconciliation process, but a certain kind of provider is not eligible. Mm-hmm. And so I think that would be more the approach that might be taken. So
yeah, I don't know if we figured out exactly how to do it. I do know it'd be tough to do in reconciliation, and I think that's the roadblock we always run into, and that's where it's important to manage people's expectations on it.
I do want to ask you about the Hamas-Gaza war too, because I do want to ask you about the Hamas-Israel war too, because I know you've been outspoken on that, and I think it's also really important. Do you think we're going to get the rest of the hostages home under Trump? What's your take on the next steps for peace in the Middle East? I know it's a huge question and topic.
Yeah, it's obviously I would say a big step in the right direction. Kind of depends on who you ask. Recently, Israel is really the one who has to answer that question. For American purposes, what do we want? We want stability. And I always remind people, like, what's our interest in this particular issue? Stability is usually the interest. Ukraine, it's stability. If we allow dictators to conquer other countries to get their land, and that just becomes a normal thing, well, say goodbye to your new world that you've enjoyed for the last 80 years and say hello to history, which was pre-1945, pre-D-Day. What happened then? Tens of millions dead, no real global economy, everyone's life sucked for thousands of years. That was human history. So there's a reason America cares, but it's not the same reason that Israel cares. Israel cares because it's existential for them. Meaning they can't have like terrorist organizations that can kill thousands of people right on their borders. So there's a reason they did what they did, but there's under increasing pressure to just at least come to an understanding, at least come to a ceasefire. Unclear to me whether that peace plan means Hamas stays in power in some way. We talk about demilitarizing Hamas. Does that mean they're still the elected governing body? I don't think we know that yet. I think there was the Trump effect probably helped because, he in his typical Trump threatening kind of way said I can't remember exactly what he said, but it was very threatening. And you better release the hostages by the time I get in office, or you'll have hell to pay, or something like that. And I would believe him. And that probably helped the situation along a little bit. It's helpful when you take a side. One of the problems with the way Biden has dealt with this particular situation is dithering on which side he wants to take, and it's just not helpful. You need to be more clear about where you stand on the issue, and that actually helps everyone, including Gazans who are suffering because they let Hamas rule them, and that's a terrorist organization that likes to kill innocent people and babies. So, it's a horrible situation. But I always say, I'm like, what would you do if they killed that many Americans? And proportionally, you're talking about 43,000 Americans just murdered in cold blood. What would you do? I don't think we'd ever stop fighting. I don't think as Americans we'd ever have a peace deal with whoever did that to us. You'd send guys like me there, and we would kill them forever. That's what we would do. And so like I don't think people put themselves in these really situations enough, because I know how we would react if you attacked us in that kind of manner. But do we get the rest of the hostages? Yes, I think it seems to be like we're on track to do that. Seems to be. It's hard to predict. Don't have a lot of crystal balls.
I think there were a couple American hostages released yesterday, is my understanding. And, I'm hopeful that this will all be over soon. And there's 2 little children. There was a 9-month-old little boy, Kefir and Ariel, and his 4-year-old brother. And they would be like 2 now and 6. I mean, they've been hostages in Gaza.
Crazy. Yeah.
And the world just has ignored it largely. I mean, obviously America is trying to support Israel's attempt to get them back, but it is, and then there's all the horrible collateral of lives lost in Gaza, lives lost in Israeli soldiers, everything else. It's obviously a mess, and a lot of people are just wanting it to end. Yeah,
and a lot of the world, it's not like the world forgot there, but they've been focused on Israel, and focus on Israel atrocities. And again, I think there's a lot of misinformation out there. Hamas has been good for decades at this game, where you attack, and then you use your own people as human shields, and then you use that as PR. This is the cycle over and over and over again. It has been for a long time, and the world falls for it. But it is what it is. That's why it's important to have, I think, a clear-eyed moral view of it, and a realistic view too. That's why I bring up, like, what would you do if 40,000 of your fellow Americans were just murdered? I mean, I just bombed just murdered, like straight up shot,
and
gunned
some of them
down,
tortured, raped.
raped.
I mean, really disgusting. Children kept kidnapped. I mean, really dark stuff. The darkest of the dark.
Right. What would you do? Like I don't think you'd ever stop fighting this until they were eradicated. I know I wouldn't. Yeah. So it's hard to place a lot of blame. People are like, well, they could do it differently. And I'm like, well.
Like how?
Yeah, I'm like, well, tell me more about how you understand urban warfare. Because, and of course they don't. They don't understand that there's thousands of miles of tunnels. That's just what, Hamas uses a lot of their aid money to build is thousands of miles of tunnels, which is also why it's so hard to rescue hostages. People are like, just use special operations, just be surgical. I'm like,
just send Dan Crenshaw in there.
Tell me more about what you know about special operations and like what's required of this. Like, it's not as simple as you think. There's real operational issues with any hostage rescue for sure. You've got to know exactly where they're at. You got to have a plan. This is the most dangerous kind of mission there is. You can't use the kind of tactics you would normally use. Hostage rescues are extremely dangerous and difficult, and they're especially difficult when the hostages are probably in these tunnels, and we don't know where the entrances to these tunnels usually are. I mean, oftentimes they're like in a random apartment building.
Or a children's school.
Yeah, often. Yeah, exactly. And so it's a very difficult situation. Always has been. It's one of the more difficult urban environments that anyone has ever fought a war in. And so,
do you think Israel is being uncaring of civilians because of the civilian death count that Hamas is reporting of Gazans? Do you think Israel could be I know you said armchair quarterback, like who it's such a difficult fight to fight, but based on your sense of it, I mean, you've been in warfare, you understand it. Do you think that they're doing as best a job as one can reasonably do, or do you think they're actually just trying to Holocaust, all of Gaza, like they're being accused of?
No, I think they're doing the best they can, and it comes from experts who have really just crunching some actual data in an objective way. They've done more than I think any other campaign in history, including ours. In places like Fallujah, they're dropping leaflets, they're sending texts out. You need to get out. You need to get out of here. You can't be here. We're about to do an operation here. It's terrible tactics to telegraph to the enemy where you're going to be, but they've been doing it. So I think they do as much as they possibly can. They use precision weaponry to the greatest extent they possibly can. But you are talking about a very dense environment, and it's horrible that there's casualties. It'd be better if Hamas gave up. why don't they just do that? Like, and how come none of the people who criticize Israel, they could also say, well, why doesn't Hamas just give up? And then the war would end. And that's the difference between, if Israel just gives up, let's say Israel just lays down all their arms and just throws them in the ocean, what would happen? Hamas would cleanse them. They would commit genocide from the river to the sea, just like what's in their doctrine. If Hamas laid down their arms, what would happen? Gazans would live peacefully. That's what would happen. There would be no genocide. So it's, the moral difference between the two sides is massive.
I think a lot of people are just seeing endless, I would call it propaganda of people saying Israel is like the bad guy here, Israel. And they're not seeing what you're stating very reasonably and clearly about what the actual dynamics are on the ground in Gaza and Israel.
And that's always been a problem that Israel has had and Jews have had for a very long time. So, putting out some context and truth out there is important. Because when you see it on campuses and especially the future of the Democrat Party, the current Democrat Party, the older folks, definitely more pro-Israel, or at least have like a sane view of the situation. The younger generation is wildly anti-Israel, wildly anti-Semitic. If you're chanting "River to the Sea," it means genocide. I hate to break it to you, that's what it means. But that's kind of that's what you're normally hearing on college campuses. Now, is that an extreme minority view on college campuses? Turns out, some data would show that it is. So we're maybe not in as bad a position as we think we are, but it's still a problem. I mean, it's just getting people the facts is still a problem.
Congressman, thank you so much for fighting for life, fighting for life in the womb and outside of the womb. And thank you again for your service.
Appreciate it.
And for being so pro-family.
Thank you.
That was awesome.
Yeah. Okay.